We are back again with On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and we are wrapping up a very busy period in MMA and the UFC, as this event will see the final card from the last 7 days. And this is going to be an interesting night of fights. I see a lot of very live underdogs here, so I'm looking forward to breaking this down. And let's get straight to it. UFC Jacksonville 2, and in the main event, in their heavyweight division, we've got Alistair Overeem versus Walt Harris. Walt Harris is currently the minus 160 favourite, with the comeback on Alistair Overeem at plus 140. In regards to this line, I think it's probably about right. I do see value on Walt Harris. I do also see the line getting a little bit wider as well. This wouldn't surprise me if it ended up hitting the minus 175 line, minus 180, maybe even a push up to minus 200. I think the value is a little scarce at that minus 200 line if it got there, but right now I do see there's value on Walt Harris. It's a typical veteran versus upcoming prospect potentially. Walt Harris's ceiling is still a little bit unsure right now. I do think a lot of the heavyweights above him in the rankings would have a good chance of beating him. I don't think one of them is Alistair Overeem. And like I say, I think it's a good fight for him. He's going to be able to come into this fight. I think he's going to be able to showcase his skills for reasons that I'll talk about very soon. But I just think that he's going to be hungry for that win. He's going to be motivated. And stylistically, he's got a lot of attributes that I think is going to be a nightmare for someone like Alistair Overeem. So both are obviously really big men. One of the main reasons why I'm picking Walt Harris in this fight is due to Overeem's last fight against Rosenstruik. Overeem just didn't look like Overeem. I know he was arguably winning that fight, and he would have won if Rosenstruik hadn't knocked him out with a few seconds to go, but that doesn't mean that Overeem looked good in that fight, and in my opinion, he didn't. I was watching a fighter that had very minimal movement, that looked a lot slower than usual. His punches didn't seem to be packing too much power. It's weird to see Overeem like that, because just 2 fights ago, he was out there taking down Pavlovich and finishing him on the mat, and how he can go from that sort of performance in 2 fights to what I saw against Rosenstruik is pretty remarkable, if I'm honest. And he just didn't look like a dangerous fighter, and at heavyweight, that's a real concern. Overeem's also a type of fighter that likes to cover up when his opponents are winging hard combinations at him. He'll go back against the cage, he'll keep his guard up, he'll turtle up a little bit, he'll let the punches happen, hoping that his opponent just keeps missing or hits his arm or just gets tired and backs off so Overeem can release the guard and come back forward. But I just do not see that washing with someone like Walt Harris. He's big, he's powerful, he's athletic. And I mean, look at what happened to Sergey Spivak when he did exactly what Overeem did against Rosenstruik a couple of times. Overeem even did it against Oleinik. He covers up when his opponents are putting pressure on him and winging shots. Sergey Spivak did that against Walt Harris and ultimately got finished. I could see exactly the same situation happening with Overeem. It's just not a good look at all. I do think Overeem is still good in the clinch. I think those modified knees that come up inside the tie clinch are really technical. So I do think that he still has some of his skills and abilities, but it really does look like an Overeem that's declining right now. And I think that Walt Harris is going to have a significant speed advantage. I think that's going to be a big factor in this fight. Overeem, in my opinion, needs to try and get the fight to the mat and lay on him like he did against Rosenstruik. But again, you look at that fight with Rosenstruik and the takedown attempts were pretty poor, if I'm honest. They were being shot from way too far out. They weren't being set up. They were completely telegraphed. And Rosenstruik was defending them. Actually, when Rosenstruik got taken down, it was from trip takedowns inside the clinch. Walt Harris might have to watch that a little bit, but again, I think his balance and his strength inside the clinch is going to play a factor in this as well. I really don't know how Overeem wins this fight, if I'm being honest. I know it's heavyweight and any punch that lands clean can really knock you out. He looks like a shell of himself right now, is what I'm trying to say. He didn't look like the usual Overeem in his last fight. I think Walt Harris is going to come forward. I think Walt Harris could score takedowns potentially. He took Arlovsky down a couple of times. He took Godbeer down. So it's not as if he can't wrestle. And when he's on top, I think he's going to be heavy. But I think Harris is really going to crack Overeem at some point in this fight. The fact it's 5 rounds is a real big factor as well. If it was 3 rounds, it would be much closer. And that's the other thing. Going down the stretch, yes, we've never seen Walt Harris go into the 4th and 5th round in the UFC or in MMA. But man, Overeem from that 4th round against Rosenstruik was breathing heavy, he was tired, and that was a fight that wasn't fought at a very high pace. So it's concerning. Every element of this fight concerns me for Overeem. I said at the beginning of this breakdown, I think Walt Harris is going to be motivated. I think he's going to be hungry. Man, the year that he went through last year, I cannot imagine what him and his family had gone through with his daughter Anaya. My heart really does go out to them as a father myself. It's just horrific to hear stories like that. I am rooting for Walt Harris in this fight more than any fight that I think I've ever watched. If any fighter deserves to win on this card, it's Walt Harris. I hope he wins. I think he does win, and I think he knocks Overeem out. So I'm taking Walt Harris to win the fight. And in the co-main event, we've got Claudia Gadelha versus Angela Hill. Claudia Gadelha is currently the minus 185 favourite, with the comeback and Angela Hill at plus 160. I think there's limited value on Claudia Gadelha in this fight at minus 185. I think the line is bridging that area where it might be too high. I think it might actually come back in a little bit as well. But again, at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if it headed to over minus 200 at the same time. It just all depends on how people feel that this fight matches up. You know, style versus style, wrestler versus striker. Like I say, I think there's limited value on Gadelha. If it comes down a little bit, if it hits sort of like the minus 160 mark, there's obviously going to be more value there. But if it goes any higher, then it's going to be a dog or pass situation. In regards to the fight itself, like I say, stylistically it matches up really well because it's technically wrestler versus striker, as I've already mentioned. Claudia Gadelha is a great wrestler, fantastic grappler, topsider. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is unbelievably good. Position to position, she's heavy, she's got submissions, she's got ground and pound. Once she's got her opponent down to the mat, she can keep them there as well. And Angela Hill is someone that, you know, has been prone to takedowns in the past. She's been taken down multiple times in her fights. It's going to be hard, I think, though, for Gadelha to initially get those reads on Hill in regards to her movement, because Hill's really, really fast. And I'm actually a big fan of Hill. You know, I've cashed bets on her a couple of times. I think she's been in some really good spots previously, so I tend to have a good read on her fights. Now, like I say, her speed and her movement is one or two of her best assets, and the striking in between that, she blends it all really well. So I think initially, like I say, if she's moving, she keeps on her toes, on the back foot, angling, exiting, not letting Gadelha push her back too much. I think Gadelha is going to have to get her reads in, and I think it might take a little time. But I think at some point, sort of midway through the first round, maybe towards the end of the first round, Gadelha will score that first takedown. I mean, it might come sooner if she gets her reads in well, but I think at worst case for Gadelha, she'll score that first takedown at the latter stages of round one, and then she could potentially have those reads in and be able to replicate that, really push on a game plan and start to get Angela Hill down. Now, what's really interesting about this fight is Gadelha has had gas tank issues lately, so she will come out fast and hard in the first round. She's got half a second round as well, but it's that second half of the second round where you really see that tempo change, where you really see that she's starting to become a little tired. And with some fighters, I would say that, you know, Gadelha might not gas against them. There's certain styles that Gadelha won't gas against, but I do think that Angela Hill is going to be one of those fighters that is going to make Gadelha work. And with that movement, with that speed, and with that striking, when Gadelha starts slowing down, Angela Hill will take over the fight at that point. But I do think that this is definitely one of those fights where that scenario can happen. However, one of the reasons why I'm picking Gadelha is because even though I think she can take that first round, potentially take the second round, and lose the third round and still win the fight, I think that Gadelha's got a very good chance of finishing this fight early. She's got that submission threat, that ground and pound threat. So I think that a submission is very likely, potentially at the end of that first round, or maybe early in the second round if she can get a takedown in the second round. So I think that the reason why Gadelha is up at minus 185 and the reason why I'm picking her is because she's got those two paths to victory. Whereas Angela Hill, I don't think she can knock Gadelha out. She's got to take one of those early two rounds and then the third round, assuming that Gadelha is gassed by that third round. Because obviously, if Gadelha has worked on her conditioning and has worked on her cardio and she doesn't tire in that third round, then she could end up looking like a minus 400 favourite in this spot. But I just think Gadelha's got a couple of paths to victory in this fight. She can get the submission or the finish on the mat early, or she can take two rounds, potentially lose the third at worst case scenario and win a decision. So I'm going to take Claudia Gadelha to win the fight. And in the next fight, in the featherweight division, we've got Ige versus Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza is currently a -130 favourite with the comeback on Ige at +110. I think the value is with the underdog in this fight with Ige. I have cashed him in his last 2 fights back to back as an underdog. He is a fighter that will fight for your money, but I feel that I'm not saying that Ige should be a favourite in this spot. I'm not saying the line should be flipped and Ige should be -130, but I think this fight should be a straight up pick'em. I think that there's obviously a few unknowns with Edson Barboza, which I'll talk about very shortly. But yeah, right now the value's on Ige. If it does come in, which I think it might do closer to fight night, I think it might end up hitting that pick'em range. If it does, then there is limited value on Ige. But right now, with a plus number next to his name, I feel that there's marginal value on Ige for sure. Now, this fight is really tricky, and like I say, it's got some question marks on Edson Barboza's side because this is the first time in his career that he's actually dropping down in weight to featherweight. I'm not saying he ever had huge drastic weight cuts. I'm not saying his cardio was ever horrific, even though lately it hasn't looked the best. But dropping down in weight and doing that during a global pandemic as well, I'm not sure is the wisest move to make. But, we'll find out on Saturday night. I just feel that he is going to be cutting too much weight. It could end up being a very drastic weight cut. He is working with Darren from American Top Team, so he has got a strength and conditioning program going on right now to help him get down. But I saw an image of him which was, I think, about a week ago, so a couple of weeks out from fight night, and man, there was just no meat on the bones at all. He looked very drained, he looked skinny, and he definitely has more weight to cut. That final weight push is always in fight week, so if that's 2 weeks out from fight week, I've got no idea how he's going to get down to that weight, if he's even going to make the weight, and if he does, how he's going to look. So I do think there's a lot of red flags there. Is it going to affect his cardio, which, like I say, wasn't looking so great lately? Is his power going to translate down there? I think his kick power will actually translate. I think he'll have a bit more speed. He might lose a little bit of the power, but it's still going to hurt if he's kicking Ige. I can assure you of that. Is it going to affect his durability? What's his chin going to be like? Again, he's never really been a chinny fighter, but he has taken a lot of damage lately. So with that in mind and then cutting weight, is that going to affect durability? So there are a lot of question marks around this fight for Edson Barboza because of the weight cut. But these aren't questions that you think could be positive or negative. I mean, in my opinion, I think they're all negative questions because we're basically talking about a fighter's performance in this fight. Now, from a stylistic perspective, with Edson Barboza, he's a striker, and when you look historically back at his record, he hasn't fared the best against fighters that like to push forward, have a good forward pressure game, can fight really well inside the pocket, have good sharp hands, accurate hands, power as well, and also that have the takedown ability and grappling topside. And that describes Ige. He came into the UFC. Me personally, I thought he was just, another fighter that's probably not going to get anywhere close to the top 15, that probably has a bit of a time limit inside the UFC before potentially he goes on a 3-4 fight losing streak and gets cut. But man, he's proved me wrong. Fight by fight is improving. Fight by fight, the level of competition is getting better as well. But like I say, the development in his skills are also improving rapidly. He's fixed up his boxing and his overall striking game so well. He's improving his wrestling, he's improving grappling. He's a legit black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so it's not as if he was ever a bad grappler, but he did make positional mistakes from time to time on the mat. We saw a few of them in the Jordan Griffin fight, but he's really starting to round his game out really well, and I just feel with someone like Ige, it's only going to be a matter of time before all these developments really gel together and he starts looking like a very serious problem for a lot of fighters in the division. But he's got to fight a certain way in this fight. He can't sit back and accept the fight at range, because the one thing that does work for Barboza in this fight is, even though he's going down in weight and he's got a lot of weight to cut, he's still going to be very tall and very rangy for the division. And being a striker that predominantly likes to kick and sit on the outside, kicking in, that's perfect for him. He will relish being the taller, longer fighter, but he's got to maintain that range and distance. Ige can't allow that. So there is going to be that battle initially. If Barboza kicking at Ige's going to have to make a decision right there and then, whether he's going forward and putting pressure on him, Or, he's going to take a little bit more time, lose that first round, potentially get beat up, and then have the fight slip away from him the second and the third round as well. He's got to make that decision early on, and it's got to be a positive one. If Ige can come forward, if he can put that pressure on, he's going to have to eat a couple of kicks early on to get inside of that pocket of Barboza. But if he can do that and he can get inside and he can start landing hands on him, then in my opinion, the world's his oyster in that point, because he could potentially land a hard shot on Edson Barboza's chin and put Barboza down. He could clinch up with Barboza and just, dirty box him and put pressure on him, really frustrate him, wear him out, really test that cardio. Or he could try and take him down to the mat, let him get back up, take him down again wearing on the cardio, put ground and pound on him on the mat, test that durability on the chin. And if Dan Ige does that in that first round, then I feel that he's going to put himself in a very good position to win the fight, because in my opinion, I don't think durability is going to be a huge issue for Barboza. I think Ige could knock him out anyway. He punches hard, he hits hard. There's a lot of fighters in the division he'll knock out. So I don't think that the durability is going to be over exaggerated here in the decrease of it. But the one thing that I do feel is going to be a big problem for Barboza is that cardio. So Danny Ige's got to test it early on, otherwise he's going to lose the fight. If he makes bad decisions in that first round, he will lose the fight. And I feel the first round is going to decide the winner. But I'm going to pick Dan Ige. I think Ige does go forward. He does do a good job of doing that anyway. He's got to know not to stay at range with Barboza. It's not a secret, is it? I think he's going to go forward, put the pressure on, drain that cardio, clinch, wrestle, pocket box. And I think if he can do that in the first round, he can tire Barboza out. Rounds 2 and 3 will be a lot easier for him and he'll go on to win the fight. So I'm going to take Dan Ige to win. And in the next fight, we've got Eryk Hernandez versus Krzysztof Jotko. Krzysztof Jotko is currently the -150 favourite, with the comeback on Hernandez at +130. And again, I feel the values with the dog in this fight. I think the line might close up a little bit. It was sort of around +110, +115 a couple of days ago. More money came in on Krzysztof Jotko. But I think it is one of them that might widen, close, and just be a bit of back and forth. I don't think the line will flip. I don't think it'll go into a pick'em. I do feel that Eryk Hernandez might remain the underdog come fight night. So, like I say, I think there's value on the dog in this fight. When I was taping Krzysztof Jotko, I used to be actually a huge fan of Krzysztof Jotko in regards to his skills and talents. And it's strange because he almost seems to have fallen off a cliff lately. And actually, when you go back and watch footage on him, I was actually a little underwhelmed. I think at one point there was a lot of hype around him and him being able to break that top 10, potentially top 5, and be a problem for a lot of fighters. But one fight in particular I went and watched back was the Scott Askham fight. And I know it was quite a few years ago now, but the reason I watched that fight is because Scott is a southpaw and Eryk Hernandez is a southpaw. So I wanted to see what tools that Yoko was using against southpaws. And actually, regardless of the analysis of that fight and what I took from taping that fight, I actually think that Scott won that fight. It wasn't like the whitewash I think a lot of people remember it, and that goes for a lot of Yotko's fights. I don't think Eryk Hernandez is also an absolute monster of a fighter, especially at middleweight. I think he's a much better fighter at light heavyweight. I know he had that bad performance against Khalil, but I think at light heavyweight, he can exert more energy, he can throw more strikes, throw more volume, because the weight cut isn't as drastic. And that's actually one problem that I have with Eryk Hernandez at middleweight. I just feel that his volume just lacks a little bit, his output lacks, and you're watching him and you're thinking, go on, throw a combination, just let a bit of your gas tank go. But he clearly has a big cut, and I don't know whether he lets him affect him mentally in regards to him thinking inside the cage, I can't overexert myself in case I gas out. Something's got to give. And actually, if it was for the additional volume, I think he would absolutely destroy Yotko in this fight. Like I say, I'm picking Eryk Hernandez to win the fight. I think Eryk Hernandez does win. I just want to see more volume. The problem I've got with Yotko is he's not looked great in his last few fights. I know he won the fight against Amadovsky, but let's be honest, that was a bit of a gimme fight. It was quite easy for him to score takedowns, stay on top and win the fight. But against Marc-Andre Barrios, who I'm not convinced is a UFC caliber fighter, if I'm honest, and I don't think he's got many fights left. I know he's fighting Oscar Pajota soon, but if he has a bad performance or loses that fight, he could end up getting his walking papers by the UFC. And Yotko went to a very, very close split decision with him. I think if Eryk Hernandez fought Marc-Andre Barrios, he would beat him relatively comfortably. So I know we're talking a little bit of MMA math now, and it doesn't always work out like that, but just looking at the previous opponents and how they've performed, I think Hernandez has looked better than what Yotko has recently. And for that reason, I do think Hernandez should be a slight favourite in this fight. He's not, he's an underdog. The value on the underdog, I'm picking Hernandez to win. And in the next fight, we've got Song Yadong versus Marlon Vera. Song Yadong a minus 180 favourite. The comeback on Marlon Vera at plus 158. And again, I feel there's value on the underdog. I'm not sure, again, where this line moves. I feel that it's quite off as it is with Marlon Vera at plus 158. So my gut would tell me that the line closes in a little bit, but Song Yadong's got hype. People love him. I love him. He's an entertaining fighter to watch. He's got a big right hand. Big knockout power. That knockout of Perez was brutal. But in regards to the line, again, I think it could be a line that fluctuates a little bit. I think it could close a little bit and then widen again. But yeah, for me, the value is on the dog. Now, for those that have listened to my podcast for quite a while now, you'll know that I've never really been high on Marlon Vera at all, really. I normally try and bet against him. But in this fight, I feel that I'm looking at a fighter that is so developed. Credit where credit's due. He had a sketchy start in the UFC, traded wins and losses, really struggled to get anything going. Now he's on a 5-fight winning streak, and in those 5 fights, there's 5 finishes. Admittedly, again, the level of competition hasn't been great, and you could argue Song Yadong would also beat those same fighters as well, but the fact is that he's taken out these guys the UFC are putting in front of him. I think one of his biggest improvements and developments is his Muay Thai. I think his kicking game's come on leaps and bounds. His hands are still a work in progress, but again, there's still a developed element of his game. The pressure that he's now putting on fighters, bear in mind that Vera is a long-rangey fighter for the division. He's not massively tall, but he just fights really long. He's got long legs. But the guy is pressuring fighters himself now rather than trying to stick on the outside and sort of counter and tip away. I think he's really coming to his element here, and he's realised that he's a much better fighter coming forward and being aggressive, but he's also smart with it. So he'll be aggressive, he'll throw hands inside the pocket, he'll come into dangerous positions, no problem. But when it gets a little bit too heated, he will recognise that, he'll step back out of the danger, reset and go again. Really smart guy. He's going to have problems against Song Yadong in this spot, though, and he's got to fight a certain way. So Song is predominantly a striker, out of the orthodox stance. He's got a nice 1-2. Like I've already said, a powerful right hand. The best thing about Song Yadong in regards to his attributes and how he fights is that movement in and out the pocket. I say this every time I break a fight of his down, but it really is beautiful to watch. He's so slick, it's seamless, and he can strike whilst moving in and out as well. It really is a solid part of his game. He's a well-rounded fighter anyway. We've seen him offensively wrestle, seen him on top side. He's got a heavy top pressure game. He's finished fighters on top position. He's submitted fighters. So he is well-rounded. But having said that, Song's not a perfect fighter. Most aren't. He's beatable. There's ways to beat him. Style versus style. One of the things that would beat a style of someone like Song Yadong is kicks. A kick-heavy game. Teeps to the midsection. Front kicks. When he's trying to smoothly slide in and out of range, landing those strikes, a front kick or a teep kick to the midsection, like I've already said, is something that can nullify that or at least prevent it happening continuously throughout the fight. And I feel that those types of kicks are in Marlon Vera's arsenal of weapons. I also think that if this fight hits the mat, there's a big skill gap. I think Vera, whether he's on top or whether he's on bottom, is going to be dangerous anywhere. So I feel that Vera's got more paths to victory in this fight. I think he could finish the fight with a submission or ground and pound on the mat if Song gets tired or frustrated, like he was starting to do in the Cody Stamann fight in his last fight. But I actually think that Vera might be able to outpoint him on the feet if he fights in a certain way, which you can't ignore the developments on Vera. You've got to assume that the guy is still improving, and I think we see another improved version of him inside the cage. I don't like to pick against Song Yadong because I do like him as a fighter. I think he's got some phenomenal attributes in MMA. He's obviously got a really hard power right hand that he can put anybody away with. So, Vera's going to have to mind his P's and Q's, but I think the value is with Vera in this fight. You can't ignore the development. So I'm picking Marlon Cheeto Vera to win. And in the next fight, we've got the returning Matt Brown versus Miguel Baeza. Miguel Baeza is currently the minus 200 favourite with the comeback on Matt Brown at plus 170. Once again, I think the value is on the underdog. I'm really surprised that it's this high. I know that A lot of people are high on Baeza. He has got a crisp striking game. He's going to be making developments, 27 years old, 8-0. I understand all that, but man, you've got to respect the veteran Matt Brown, the more experienced Matt Brown. I think the line is going to close up. I'd be shocked if Matt Brown went closer to plus 200. I think that would just be completely insane if it went that high. So I think it closes. I think that the value is on Matt Brown. And from a style versus style perspective, Miguel Baeza, I've already mentioned, he is a crisp striker, but he definitely has some flaws in his game. He doesn't piece combinations together very well. He tends to load up on that right hand, doesn't set the right hand up well. His biggest weapon in this fight and in his game is that low kick, though. Matt Brown has definitely got to check those low kicks or do something about it early on, because if he doesn't, he's going to end up getting finished by low kicks. I think it's a solid kick. It took Hector Aldana out. Well, it was the start of the end of that fight. But Matt Brown's definitely got to watch out for that. He's got to make sure he doesn't get hit by that too much. In regards to Matt Brown himself, he's a good technical striker. He always has been. The dude's well-rounded. He's seen every type of style. He's been in every type of fight. Good technical striking. He's strong in the clinch. His jiu-jitsu is really solid. His wrestling's good as well. And like I say, he's got that experience over Baeza. There's a huge gap of experience in this fight. I think that it's actually going to be a big factor as well, because let me give you a scenario, for example. If Baeza hurts Matt Brown, I have got far more confidence in Matt Brown to stay calm, stay composed, and try and do the best that he can to recover quickly. If Baeza gets in a bad situation, I do not have anywhere near that same confidence that Baeza is going to remain calm, composed, and do what he needs to do to recover in the best way he can against a veteran and still a talented fighter in Matt Brown. So that's what we're dealing with here. So that's one factor for me, the experience. The second thing is the grappling. I think this is a super easy path to victory for Matt Brown if he wants it. If he goes there, he might just want to stand and strike for an exciting fight with Miguel Baeza. And actually, I think he would be doing the wrong thing. I think he should go in there. He should clinch up against Baeza, wear him down a little bit, get takedowns, get on top of him. I think even if Matt Brown makes a mistake on the mat and ends up on bottom, I think he's got a good chance of submitting Baeza or reversing him or even getting back up to his feet if he needs to. But if he's on top, I don't see Baeza getting up. I think Matt Brown can spend time on top, beat him up, look for submissions, again, really wear him out. Baeza, for exciting as he looked against Aldana, you go back to the Contender Series fight, and that was a fight where he put his opponent down 3 times in 2 rounds and then lost the 3rd round. It's not a good look. I just don't understand how Baeza's this big of a favourite. I think that the possibility of him knocking Matt Brown out is absolutely there. Matt Brown has got to not get hit by that right hand, because when that right hand does hit, it hits very hard. So he's got to not get hit by that. He's got to make sure he checks the leg kicks. And of course, just watch that body, because Matt Brown is notoriously weak to the body, even though the shots that he normally gets finished with or dropped with are the power left hook to the body and the left kick to the body as well, which is predominantly a southpaw. So he does tend to struggle more against southpaws than he does against an orthodox fighter. Baeza is orthodox, not southpaw, but he's still got to watch that body just to make sure that he doesn't get hitting it too hard and go down. But I've got Matt Brown to win. I think he's got an easy path to victory should he take it. Will he take it is a different question, but I think experience is going to play a big factor. The grappling could play a big factor. So I'm going to pick Matt Brown to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got Anthony Hernandez versus Kevin Holland. This is a straight pick'em from a betting line perspective. And there's value on either side with a good read. You know, if you've got a strong read for either of these fighters to win, then this line is playable for either guy. As for where the line goes, it's a little bit confusing because Hernandez opened up the underdog in this fight. I think it was about plus 110. He came back in, money came in on Hernandez and it's ended up sitting at a pick'em right now. So obviously there was some early love for Hernandez, but I think the name value from experience and, how much people like to watch him fight with Kevin Holland may play a part into it. So I basically can't see Kevin Holland being plus money in this fight. I think that people just wouldn't let that happen. If he hit plus money, there'd be a surge of bets coming in on him. So it could be one of those where it stays at a pick'em close to fight night. We'll see. From a style versus style perspective, it's really interesting because Kevin Holland is very well-rounded. Hernandez is also well-rounded, but I don't think he's as well-rounded. He's got strengths in other areas, which I'll touch upon in a minute. But yeah, Kevin Holland's long. He likes to fight at range. He also likes to play around in the cage as well. Talk a little bit of smack to his opponent inside the cage. Look over to his opponent's corners, have a chat with them, have a chat with the commentators. He's just a really fun guy to watch, and he likes to have fun inside the cage. Ultimately, though, I think he makes some really bad decisions inside the cage as well. You look at the Gerald Meerschaert fight. That fight was just full of positional mistakes on the mat, and it could cost him in some fights, and I think it might cost him in this fight as well, because when you go back and watch Hernandez's career pre-UFC, I know he hasn't had the best start in the UFC. He's 1-1, but he hasn't looked really great in either fight. And the one fight that I went back and watched outside of the UFC was the Brendan Allen fight. Now, Brendan Allen has obviously improved leaps and bounds since that fight, because he got pretty much dominated from bell to bell by Hernandez on the mat. And it's really surprising because of how Brendan Allen has looked in the UFC. The dude looks like he's got phenomenal grappling. So to actually sit there and watch Anthony Hernandez dominate him, wrestling, grappling, sweeps, reversals, takedown defense, it was crazy to see. Hernandez has got really underrated grappling and wrestling. So I think that this is a good opportunity for Hernandez to forget about that striking for this fight, do exactly what Brendan Allen did against Kevin Holland, just close the distance and try and take him down. You can get Kevin Holland down, and if you're clever on the mat and you limit the space for Holland on the mat, you can control him as well. So I think that that's a very clear path to victory for Anthony Hernandez. If he doesn't come out there and wrestle and he tries to strike, I think he's going to lose the fight. So he's got to make the right decisions inside the cage. If he comes in there and wrestles and grapples with Kevin Holland, I think Anthony Hernandez is winning the fight. And I do think, considering what's happened in his opening two fights, he is going to go back to that, what looks like his bread and butter. I think he's going to get that wrestling game going. I think he's going to take Kevin Holland down, and I think he's going to do his magic on the mat. So I'm picking Anthony Hernandez to win the fight. In the next fight, we've got Mike Davis versus Giga Chikadze. Mike Davis currently sitting as the minus 220 favourite, with the comeback on Giga Chikadze at plus 180. In regards to the line, I don't see any value right now. The reason being is I think it's one of those fights where the line on the favourite is too high, but you don't want to bet the dog because the favourite is probably going to win. So it's just one of those fights where you're sort of stuck in the middle, and it sort of creates a little bit of a pass. However, if the line does come down, and I do think that Giga Chikadze is actually better than a lot of people give him credit for, there might start to be some value on Mike Davis for sure. And like I say, I think it's going to be an interesting fight. Do the lines come down? Potentially. I've got a funny feeling it will sort of stay anywhere between minus 220 and minus 190. I don't think it'll exceed either one of those, but we'll see when it comes to fight night. From the fight itself, as I've already mentioned, I think Giga Chikadze is a little underrated by some people. Yes, his MMA game isn't brilliant, but he's coming on, his takedown defense is working. He seems to be exploding from bottom and sweeping his opponents when they're on top of him. And I've seen him do that 3 times now. I've seen him do it twice against Brandon Davis, and then I saw him do it against Jamal Emmers as well. So whatever he's doing with Master Rafael Cordeiro over at King's MMA is definitely working. Obviously, he comes from a kickboxing background, so that'd be why him and Master Rafael Cordeiro are working really well together. And like I say, the ground game is improving as well. I actually think this is going to be a great fight because I'm really high on Mike Davis. I think he's a solid fighter. He's got good boxing technique. He uses his kicks really well. He's got good knees. He's got wrestling in his back pocket as well. He came in on his UFC debut and fought Gilbert Burns and put up a pretty good account of himself until obviously the inevitable happened with Gilbert Burns' Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But man, like Mike Davis is a very, very good fighter. I'd actually be a lot more confident in him in this fight if I hadn't seen on social media him saying that he hasn't trained for 4 to 5 months because he had an injury in January. When that cleared up, the COVID-19 struck, so now he's being limited to what he can do because of that as well. But regardless of that, I still think that he's the better fighter at this point than Giga Chikadze, and we'll see that inside the cage. He's got to be careful of spin back kick to the body, the Giga kick I think he calls it. He's got to be careful of walking into something hard. Giga's got a very, very technical kickboxing game, doesn't waste many strikes, very accurate, very sharp, very quick, very powerful. So Mike Davis has got to mind his P's and Q's in this fight, but I just feel that if he goes strike for strike with Giga inside the pocket, I think he's going to beat him. And he's also got wrestling in his back pocket as well. I think there's a chance that he could take Giga down. I don't think we're going to see one of those explosion sweep reversals this time. I think if Mike Davis is on top, then he's going to be heavy on top. Yes, Giga might be able to get back up to his feet, use the cage if it's against the cage, but I just feel that Davis has got more paths to victory in this fight. I think strike for strike, he's slightly better. I think he's quicker. I think he hits harder. Like I've already mentioned, he's got wrestling in his back pocket, so I'm going to take Mike Davis to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Cortney Casey versus Mara Romero Borella. Cortney Casey is currently the -150 favourite with the comeback on Borella at +130. Once again, I think there's value on the underdog in this fight. I don't think the line should be this wide. Cortney Casey is one of those fighters that is quite awkward to fight. You know, she's tall, she's long, she uses range, little pitter-patter jabs, taps to the legs, you know, all the real annoying, frustrating things that you're being outscored by volume and not looking great in the judges' eyes. But in regards to Borella, the one aspect of her game I think she's going to be able to take advantage of Cortney Casey in this fight is the wrestling, the takedowns, because Cortney Casey has been taken down a lot of times in the octagon. I think it's 19 times in 10 fights that she's been taken down, and 3 of those fights there were no takedowns. So that's like 19 times in 7 fights. She's been taken down a lot. Borella has taken down pretty much every single opponent that she's fought inside the UFC. So I definitely think that there's something there that can be exploited from Borella. I do think that this is the type of fight that's going to go to a decision. I think it's a type of fight that's going to be relatively close. I think Borella's going to be able to score takedowns. If she can remain on top for a little while, that'll go in her favour as well. But this is the reason why I think the line should be much closer, because I do think it's a close fight. The value is 100% on Borella right now. You know, there's no way you can pay -150 for Cortney Casey, in my opinion. I think Borella's going to score takedowns. I think she's going to make it close. I think she's going to take a decision. So I've got Mara Romero Borella to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got Darren Elkins versus Nate Landwehr. Darren Elkins currently the -120 favourite. The comeback on Nate Landwehr at +100. This is a line flip. Nate Landwehr opened the favourite. Darren Elkins opened the dog. I actually think that there's value on the dog now. I was going to pick Nate Landwehr as the favourite to win, but obviously with the line flipping, like I say, I think there's value on the dog. Not sure actually where this line goes. We could see some fluctuation in regards to it coming in closer to a pick'em and then maybe Landwehr edging back out to a dog. And we might even see Elkins come back to plus money as well. It's one of those fights that's going to be really gritty, and I think a lot of people might see value in the underdog, which might keep swaying the line. In regards to style versus style, it's really interesting because, like I say, they're both gritty fighters. They're both fighters that like to get in there and bang. They like to bleed. They like to make their opponents bleed. And I think it's going to be a very scrappy fight. The winner depends on Elkins, though, because if Darren Elkins can really, really get his wrestling game going, score takedowns, spend time on top, then he will beat Nate Landwehr. But if he can do that, Nate Landwehr's not that easy to take down. And in fact, the only fighter that really has made it look easy to take him down was Khamzat Dalgiev when he won the title in M1. But Dalgiev is a Dagestani-born Russian, you know. He's got good wrestling, good takedowns. So it's going to be interesting to see if Elkins can actually take Landwehr down. If he can, then I think he wins the fight relatively comfortably. But man, I feel that Elkins is going to stand in there and trade a bit as well. He loves to get in there and just really bang with his opponents before he even really starts to think about his wrestling. I think Landwehr's going to be the more durable fighter in this spot. I think he's going to hit harder. I think he's going to be able to put Elkins down if he starts landing a barrage of attacks. I think he could push Elkins back to the cage. You just got to make sure he doesn't get into those clinch positions with Darren Elkins. But I'm picking Nate Landwehr to win. Like I say, I think he's got more in the tank at this point, more durability, more aggression. And even if he does get taken down, if he can get back up and he starts tiring Darren Elkins out, then he's just going to pour it on and he's just going to be a nightmare for Elkins inside the cage. So I'm going to pick Nate Landwehr to win this fight. And finally, we've got Rodrigo Nascimento versus Don'Tale Mayes. Don'Tale Mayes is currently the -120 favourite with the comeback on Nascimento at +100. I don't see any value in this fight at all. I wouldn't recommend betting either side. And I'm going to make this breakdown really quick because it's actually really difficult at the same time. You know, there's just not enough tape on Rodrigo Nascimento. I think I've been able to watch 2 fights of his. And the first fight I watched was just over 3 minutes. And the second fight that I watched was against a debutant that also ended in the first round that took place over 4 years ago, back in 2016. All I can tell you from both of those fights is not a lot. And, you know, Nascimento ended up fortunately on top in both fights and then finished the fight. You know, it really doesn't tell me a lot at all. I can only make an educated assumption that he might be predominantly a grappler, which might make this a fun fight because Don'Tale Mayes is predominantly a striker. So it's going to be really, really interesting to how it plays out because, like I say, I'm in the dark about one half of this fight. For the sake of a pick, I'm going to pick Don'Tale Mayes just because I've seen more of him and I feel that he might be able to land something on Nascimento. It's a heavyweight, so if he lands a big punch, it could be all over. It's really not a confident pick, guys, for the reasons that I've mentioned. So I'm going to pick Don'Tale Mayes to win the fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it, and once again, guys, I'd really appreciate all the likes to the video and subscriptions to our new channel too. It's making a huge difference and I can't thank you guys enough for those that are doing it. If you do want to comment, if you do want to chat about any of the particular fights, drop something in the comment section. I will be on the YouTube channel. I will answer any questions you've got and we can talk fights. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on, and as a long-term winning gambler over the last 3.5 years, that'll come good for you. And we also cater for you fun gamblers that like the fun long shot parlays, or ACCAs as we call them in the UK. We have plenty of different packages for you guys to choose from, and they're all at very affordable prices as well. Just hop on to MMAPlay365.com to see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.